Welcome to Virtue and Victory, a practical guide of Stoic virtues to triumph in chess and life. Adam Farr is a father, entrepreneur, aspiring Stoic, and amateur philosopher. Douglas Wong is a chess enthusiast, Stoic in training, and passionate about finding ways for us all to be at our best selves. Please welcome your hosts, Adam Farr and Douglas Wong.
Welcome back. In this discussion, we'll be talking about the Stoic virtue of wisdom. And for me, it's the ability to understand and navigate life complexities through clear, rational insight. That is to discern what is within our control and beyond our control. That allows us to make decisions that are aligned with virtue and reason rather than being impacted by emotional impulses. So wisdom is understanding the nature of reality and guiding our actions toward what is truly good. As always, happy to have this conversation with you and with Adam. So Adam, we always like to open up with some of these questions here. I'd love to get your thoughts about the Stoic virtue of wisdom and kind of what the Stoics would say about it too.
Yeah, thanks, Doug, and pleasure to be back with you all today. Appreciate the continued support. I've done a lot of meditating this week, especially on this concept of wisdom and how the Stoics maybe approach the virtue of wisdom. And as I started doing my meditations, of course, I started getting the books that I read, meditations, the Stoicism books, philosophy books, obviously looking on the internet, Google searches, etc. And it started to get extremely complex. And in my meditations, what I continued to go back to was the simplicity of things. So you've heard me say in prior episodes, the value of a vessel is in its emptiness. And that thought continued to stick in my mind. And as I continued to think through it, I remembered a quote from Socrates that said, "The only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing." And I reflected on that, and the more I reflected on that, the more I would empty my mind, as Bruce Lee used to say, and I would strive for almost an emptiness, which is what in meditations you should be trying to do, right? And so, if I were to summarize true wisdom from a Stoic value perspective, again, I could be wrong. I'm open to being wrong here. But I think the conversation must start with Socrates' quote, "The only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing." I think there's a lot of power in that. I think there's a lot of power in emptying your mind, emptying your soul. A lot of people in business, for example, listen to respond versus listening to understand. I think if you truly realize you know nothing, you don't have to have all the answers. You empty your mind and you listen to folks, you'll be a much better leader. I think all too often people think that a leader has to have all the answers. A leader has to fix everything. Sometimes all a leader needs to do is step back and listen and help people, right? And so I think that's where we would start the conversation. Now, I think it's a lot more complex from a value standpoint or a virtue standpoint when we start to get into wisdom, right? Such as wisdom is knowing that in order to live a good life, one should live in harmony with nature, like we talk about, which means that if you can't control it and the only thing you can control is how you think about it, wisdom's knowing that you must control your mind and come to peace with those things you cannot control. Right? So I think all of the virtues, all of the values will live interchangeably and in harmony with one another. And I think we could talk on and on about wisdom, but I think the conversation has to start with the Socrates quote that we shared today.
You mentioned leaders, being a good leader. I think being a good person, right? Being a good leader, being a good person are very parallel to each other. And in today's climate, just where the world is, there's a lot of noise. And being able to say, I don't know, I would like to learn more. I would like to understand more. It opens up a different pathway than sometimes what we see, where we try to force control on something that is not to be controlled by us, because we control ourselves. We ought not to try to control other people. We can influence, we can educate, we can lead, we can support, but trying to assert control may not be the best path. And I think that being able to accept, when you say empty vessel, what that means to me is saying, I don't know. Tell me more. I want to learn more. I need to understand more because I don't know everything.
Which is counter what society has taught us we should do or how we should act.
Yeah.
Society has taught us to have value, you have to know everything, right? Leaders today that are all over the news and all over the media are the guys that have everything and know everything, right? That's an interesting concept because philosophy, the philosophers of old and the old ways of living and life that we discuss here would tell us that actually the opposite is true, right? And then once a man gains everything or a person gains everything, they realize they still want something.
Mm-hmm.
And then they realize that the simplicity of life is what they're actually looking for. So what do they start doing? They start donating everything to charity. They start giving everything away. Everything they worked for 40, 50, 60 years, sacrificed their entire life to attain, they start giving it all away because once again they've realized the value of something is in its emptiness. And that's a powerful concept to really sit back and meditate on. And I'd encourage our listeners this week to meditate on the value of a vessel, the value of emptiness, the value of knowing that you know nothing. Let me quote this. It was nature's intention that there should be no need of great equipment for a good life. Every
Mm-hmm.
individual can make himself happy. External goods are of trivial importance and without much influence in either direction. Prosperity does not elevate the sage, and adversity does not depress him, for he has always made the effort to rely as much as possible on himself and to derive all delight from within himself.
Yeah.
That's crazy, right? These are passages that have been around for thousands of years, and what we keep going back to time and time again is true happiness comes and true value comes from looking within and realizing that as we observe the natural world, as we observe nature, as we observe the natural order of things, simplicity matters. Simplicity matters. I think, for example, today, we can take a real life example of that in the business world. This new Starbucks CEO, right? He's come in. Starbucks sales are declining. They're trying to figure things out, and I'm going to keep this very brief. He's come in to a company that have, over the last, call it decade or so, added and added and added and added things to the menu. You walk in the store, you've got 20 different mugs to choose from. You've got 18 different coffees to choose from. You've got 63 different drinks to choose from, right? You've got 12 different food items to choose from. Then you got 12 different desserts to choose from, right? They've added and added and added. We got to increase sales. Let's add something. Increase sales. Add something. Increase. What is the new CEO doing? He says, knock it off. We're going to get back to our roots. We're going to take away from the menu. And by taking away, we're going to add.
Yep.
Addition by subtraction. We'll talk about that in another episode. We're not going to talk about that right now, but addition by subtraction. That's what I think a lot of companies struggle with. They get to a point where they're like, we are way too complex. We need to simplify this, right? And so in order to grow, what is Starbucks doing in order to grow? They're
Simplifying.
shrinking. They're simplifying.
Yeah.
And I can tell you 1,000, 100,000 stories, 1,000,000 stories of where that's been true in life, right? When people get overwhelmed in life, when they've gathered too many things, what do they start doing? start donating everything they have. They start decluttering. They go spring
Yeah.
cleaning, etc., etc. Right? And so we should be constantly in a place realizing that maybe I've added too much complexity in my life. Maybe I've made things too difficult. What do I need to add to my life by subtracting from my life?
Yeah. I love it. As you know, when we talk about different things, business, life, I have in my head, I always kind of think opportunity costs. You can't be everything to everybody. You got to know who you are. You want to do that very well. I believe in the fundamentals. Do the fundamentals very well. Um, I love how we always thread some of the ancient wisdom with what's happening today. That's a very real scenario. You're absolutely right. We could talk about a billion business scenarios and life scenarios that apply to that, and that is wisdom. Wisdom is clarifying what is the right thing to do. We love talking about chess too because there is a connection. Chess is, to me, I see as a really good model for these concepts as life. And you reminded me of something that during one of my chess training sessions that I thought was very poignant. The feedback that was given to me is, Doug, understand the conditions for you to lose. Understand how you will lose this game. And then don't do that. Right? Understand the losing, what your opponent is trying to do to you, and then don't do that. And also be very clear on what your winning conditions are and have a plan to move in that way. So the path becomes more clear. And we've talked about in the last episode, I see the Stoic virtues as lights illuminating the path for us to navigate things that might seem complex, right? And so when I think about chess, having a good plan, every move having a purpose, we say this a lot, that embodies that Stoic philosophy of wisdom. And as we were kind of thinking about this conversation, I love going back into Stoic history and you sharing that with us a lot. I also love going back and looking at chess history. And so I want to ask this question. Have you ever had a moment or had an opponent applaud you after you defeated them? How rare is that? Right? We think about today's environment. This happened, and for our fellow chess enthusiasts, they might know about this and love to share this with them. In Game 6 of the 1972 Chess Championship, where Bobby Fischer defeated Boris Spassky, right? This is very a famous world championship. To give a little bit more context, at that time, Bobby went into that game. He played what was a novel opening at the time. It was not played very much in high-level chess, but now it is, the Queen's Gambit. Bobby Fischer, he really embodied the Stoic virtues. And if for those who've seen the movies, are familiar with Bobby Fischer, specifically at that time, you got to love Bobby Fischer, but just being very honest, he was crazy, right? He was kind of losing his mind in many different ways. There was a lot of complaints about noise. I think he wanted the audience to sit further back. He felt that the chair was uncomfortable. He was thinking about all the things that were distracting him. And quite honestly, I not being a grandmaster, not playing in a game, I felt like these were all distractions from the game. But this particular game was different. He was in the zone. Like, we talk about the zone, and he was embodying, and that's why I love this story for this conversation, the Stoic virtues of calm and being rational and focused. We were playing on Bobby Fischer's terms in that game. Of course, there's a lot of pressure being the world championship. You had the context of the Cold War, USA versus Russia. Spassky he's a great player. He had a particular style that he was playing, but Bobby Fischer kept his composure. If you look at the moves, they were very clear, principle based. He controlled what he controlled, which was his moves, and he was able to um, move around what Spassky was trying to do. In fact, we would call in concert. Another famous chess player, I'd have to look up the exact name, but called that game a beautiful symphony of play. And so they were kind of playing with each other. And Bobby Fischer, this is where he showed his brilliance in subtle movements, deep positional understanding. He neutralized threats. There was not anything really flashy in that. And he wasn't reacting emotionally. He just methodically steered the game towards where his understanding of chess principles shone through. And again, this mirrors the Stoic pursuit of wisdom, recognizing the nature of challenges, remaining focused, reason over passion, and the outcome being dictated by virtue and skill versus your emotional turmoil. And I think when we think about business or life or anything else, this is where chess models this for us. Where can we relinquish our short-term goals to drive long-term victory? And at the end of this match, Boris Spassky applauded Fischer's play. I think that's beautiful, right? We talk about it was simple, beautiful, principled, and it's a really good way to look at it. And we'll put the game up for everybody to view, and I'll share the PGN in the comments as well.
That's a great story, and I love when opponents are able to congratulate each other after a tough battle and show respect for the warrior that they were up against. And I think you're right. That's lost in our society as of late. And I think the teachings of the Stoics and the philosophies of old can help bring some of that back, but it's going to take a community effort to do so, right? And I'll go back to what's truly important in life in the simplicity of things that we're talking about when it comes to wisdom, right? Wisdom is knowing we know nothing. And one of the Stoics philosophers' only possessions was a cup.
Mm.
And as he was walking down the street, he saw a young child, a homeless child, that was using his hands as his cup. And the philosopher looks at the child and says something to the effect of, "This child has beaten me in the simplicity of life." Throws his cup out, starts using his hands. Right? And that's what I would reflect on when we think about acquiring material wealth, acquiring material goods, watching social media and trying to keep up with everybody on there. It's not healthy. It's not good. And I hope we can help influence folks to step back and think about the value and the joy that is living a simple life, right? In how it was summarized in the letter to his mother from Seneca when he was outcast on Corsica, like I read earlier. I'll read it one more time. It was nature's intention that there should be no need of great equipment for a good life. When I hear that, when I read that passage, I think about the story of the philosopher that threw his cup away, right?
Yeah.
If you don't have a cup, use your hands. It's all good. And now when I see my daughters drinking out of the sink tap instead of getting a cup, I'm not going to say anything. I love the simplicity in that, right? Yes, a father might say, "Why don't you get a cup and use a cup?" But why would I? I find joy in my daughters finding simplicity in life. So I'll continue to encourage it. It was nature's intention that there should be no need of great equipment for a good life. Every individual can make himself happy. External goods are of trivial importance and without much influence in either direction. Prosperity does not elevate the sage, and adversity does not depress him, for he has always made the effort to rely as much as possible on himself and to derive all delight from within himself. So true happiness, true wisdom, is reflecting inside, internally, realizing that all we can control is our thoughts, our actions, and our judgments. That's true wisdom.
I love it. Yeah, there's a lot of power, and I do encourage everybody to take time, meditate, reflect on. I think true beauty, true happiness is found in simplicity. I can find many times that I have done myself and I observe in life where we feel we need apparatus to do something when the joy and love is in the doing, right? You can think about, we talked before about earlier at the beginning of the calendar year, Quitter's Day and New Year's resolutions. I see very often at that time where, well, I can't go to the gym because I don't have the right shoes or I don't have the right gear. You can just go do a push up, go for a run. It's nice to have those other things, but it's not necessary.
Right.
And I'm, I may be in a particularly reflective part of my life. And I was actually having this conversation with my family recently. So I have a few indoor plants, and my son likes to eat a lot of avocados. And I just had this idea. I'm like, I'm going to take those avocado pits. I'm going to grow plants from them. I think they're beautiful plants. And so I soaked it in water. I followed the steps. And every day, every week, somebody in my family or somebody can visit, they're like, what are you doing? That thing's not going to grow. I'm like, you got to be patient. It just started sprouting. It's been like 6 weeks. It was just a wet pit sitting there. And I look at my little avocado plant and I'm like cheering it on. And I think that's also like patience and wisdom, knowing something will come to be fruitful. But you have to understand and be clear on your path and take away the distractions, as we mentioned, right? I think a very important part of my life was when I was in college. I started my college career the wrong way. I was focused on, hey man, where's the party at? I felt that it was my value was based on my social group and how much I can party, and it wasn't good. It wasn't good for me in many ways. I'm very blessed and lucky that something triggered inside me, and I understood what I needed to do and be more disciplined with my studies. And one thing I was really focused on, and my son is going into his junior year of high school, so I give him this advice. I give the advice to anybody going in that's a student going through college, no matter where you're in life, is how do you extract the most value of where you are in life? At that time, I recognized I'm at a university. The whole environment is built around me learning and having new experiences. I should take advantage of that.
Right.
And it became clear to me what to do. And then, of course, that blossomed into other things in life. And I think really what we're asking here, Adam, right, is when have you had to make a tough choice by letting go of something for a greater benefit? Again, acknowledgement, that's not easy, but being able to even think through that is you're now touching wisdom. Because how do you decide what is truly within your control? How do you know that that's the right thing to do?
Mm-hmm. I know one thing that's helped me, Doug, is reflecting on the answers that we have in front of us from the philosophers that have come before us, right?
Yeah.
A lot of these questions have been answered, right? And as we search them out, I think oftentimes we'll come back to the same things. Having personally a year ago now stepped away from my very, very secure job in a large organization, top 5 largest companies in the country, in a very, very executive role, there was some fear that maybe, or some question, I wouldn't call it fear, there was a question of, is this the right decision, right? Um, and and if it's moving you towards what you're seeking, then the answer is always right in front of you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the question is, what is this moving me towards, or what is it moving me away from? And I think wisdom's knowing that you don't have all the answers. You don't know what the results could be. You should have a desired outcome as you think
Yes.
about these things, right? If you're hiking up a mountain, as I look at the mountains here in Salt Lake City with the sun coming up, you set out on one trail, but if you're walking down that trail and the trail's blocked by boulders and trees are falling over and there's a avalanche of snow, you've got a decision to make. If I keep going down this trail, it's probably not the safest option. It's probably not the right thing to do. but there's more than one path to the top of the mountain.
Yeah.
And sometimes that path is blazing your own trail.
Mm.
And wisdom's knowing that as long as I keep moving, as long as I keep walking, as long
Mhm.
as I don't give up, as long as I don't stop, I'll make it to the top of the mountain. Now, it might take me a little longer than I originally planned because my path has changed. But as long as I keep moving and don't give up and keep showing up, I'll get to the top. I'll get to the top. And so I encourage folks to think about that as they make their decisions in life and they reflect on finding simplicity and shedding complexity. I encourage folks to be thoughtful about that.
Yeah, a lot of great wisdom there. I was thinking about the wisdom, or the mountain doesn't move.
Mm,
You as a person moves, and that's where it's very important we keep moving. Whenever we think about anything, I think about chess, how we improve in chess, how we improve in life, when we improve in business, anything that you have a strategic framework with, you got to be very clear on your goals and objectives.
hmm
That's important. You mentioned that. And then you apply any decision points against that. Is this decision going to get me closer? Yes or no? And to your point, we have to take action in an imperfect data set. We don't know everything. We don't know the future. If we did, the world would be very different, right? Like playing the lottery or making investments or gambling would not look the same if I knew the future.
Right.
So yeah, there's going to be things that we don't know, but can we accept the consequences, the outcomes? And the very important question, is it better for me to make this move? Does it get me closer? Does it get me further? And what's the cost of inaction? Because that's a choice too.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to choose your hard, like they like to say, right? It's hard to do something you don't want to do. It's also hard to give up on something you're supposed to do, but it might be the right thing to do. So you just have to choose your hard. We talk about that often, is choosing your hard in life.
It's beautiful. I think it's probably a good way to leave this conversation. A lot of things to unpack, and we definitely will get into continued conversations um, about these things. I think we always like to have some questions coming out, but I would say for the audience, please listen to the podcast, subscribe, offer feedback. We want to have this conversation with you, and we absolutely want you to make the best moves in chess, in life, and in business. Um, Remember, we're all together. We're building this community with you. Thank you.
Thanks, Doug.